I discovered that my husband faked his own death to cover up his depravity. Emily's story. I need to know if I am overreacting. This situation was already crazy. I'll give a quick TLDR, but it's an unbelievable story. Emily 35F, have been married to my husband Walt for 6 years. We have 2 kids, Paul 10M and Brian 5M. 11 years ago, when Walt and I were engaged, he went missing during a vacation trip to Thailand. He was missing for nearly 5 years and told us all he had been in a Cambodian prison that whole time. I found out right after he left for the trip. I was pregnant with Paul the first, became extremely close with his family during this time. I also met and fell in love with a man named Kevin who I was engaged to. When Walt returned, I found myself torn between picking up where we left off and continuing with Kevin. I chose to give Walt and I a chance. We got married a week later, and I was pregnant with Brian in less than a year. I thought things had been fine in our relationship. We loved each other, and despite him being a workaholic, we were mostly happy. I have never been one to indulge myself with a professional massage. I like having my shoulders or feet rubbed by Walt. It's just to me a luxury expense. And I haven't ever been willing to go. Walt has been a little bit more distant lately, and I've been feeling a little stressed with work. I have this coworker who has been pushing me, saying the place she goes is amazing. It doesn't matter who you get, they're all good, and to just go. I did, just that I walked in and asked if they had any availability. The guy at the desk said they did and took down some information. He said it would just be like 5-10 minutes. When I noticed the small bulletin behind the desk had 3 pictures from the security camera and a note above that said permanent ban. I did a double take and swore that the one guy looks just like Walt. I'm staring at this picture. When the front desk attendant asks if something is wrong, I tell him I think I know that guy in the picture. How do you get on a ban list? He says, oh, it's our owner's policy if anyone asks for a happy ending. I was aghast at that moment. People do that. He replied, yeah, not very often. It's rare, but it does happen, and sadly it seems to always happen to the same person. He then apologized for oversharing, and I told him not to worry about it. He said Lisa was ready for me. She was standing at the entrance of the hall. She was a maybe 5'1" and 110 pounds Asian American woman. I just had a feeling this was the massage therapist that always got these creeps. We went back and I enjoyed the massage with some light small talk. Her accent was totally Midwestern. This was a woman who grew up here and probably several generations before had as well. I found out she had worked at this particular place for 3 years. As we finished, I couldn't help myself, and I had to know, so I just came with the truth. This is very hard to say, but I noticed the list of band guys. One of them is my husband. Were you by chance his massage therapist? She looked at me with genuine concerns as my eyes filled and said I had to be, because all 3 guys were my clients. Which one was he? I said the one in the orange shirt. She said, oh yes, I'm very sorry. I began to cry and said, no, I'm sorry. I'm so embarrassed and so sorry. I can't believe he did that to you. Did he just outright ask? She said, this is going to be hard to hear, but you need to know the truth. If that's your husband, I brought him into the room same as you and left while he got ready. When I knocked, he said he was ready, but when I walked in, he was laying face up, fully erect and holding some amount of cash. I immediately left the room and called for Jake, our front desk guy. He escorted the man out. I wanted to throw up. I composed myself and apologized again. I ended giving her like a 100 tip. I went straight home and began prepping to leave. Then this sudden wave of calm hit me, and I realized I needed to know how far this. When I did my best to play normal, when he finally got home from work, I just treated it like a normal night. When he went to bed, I used the opportunity to go through his phone. Texts were clean, no Snapchat, WhatsApp, etc. I clicked on his Reddit. There were his 4 posts from when he came back home from his imprisonment. I had seen these before. I was about to give up. When I noticed I could switch between accounts, I was disgusted by what I found. He was joined to all Asian women fetish subs and massage subs. The chats were worse as I read through them. Most were just faceless women, probably men, pretending actually that he was sexting with, but there was one that he was definitely seeing. There were details of meetups and how much he would pay, what he wanted her to wear or do. He was paying a sex worker for happy ending massages. He kept referring to her as Saka. Quick Google search told me this was a common Cambodian name. Probably wasn't really her name, but he was paying for the fantasy. There was another conversation on there, which as I read seemed very familiar. When I realized it was Jorge on the other end. They were both covering for each other for years through various affairs. As I scrolled through their long conversation history, I came across the most knife-twisting part. They had been just talking bullshit like any other time, and Walt was telling him about his upcoming appointment. Jorge says, I bet you wish you could have just stayed in Cambodia, not have to do all this shit. Walt replies, fuck yeah, but what are you going to do? I got deported. Lol. Jorge follows, well, you were cheating on her too. I'm surprised she didn't turn you in the first time she caught you. Walt, yes, she was still holding out hope until the second time. It was all fake. It was lies. He was never in prison. He left me. I slept on the couch that night. and told him I just fell asleep out there the next day. I asked Jorge to come meet me on the pretense of needing help with something. When he arrived, I showed him the evidence I had of his affair and told him it was going to his whole family. If he didn't tell me the whole truth right now. Jorge laid it all out to me. Walt has been obsessed with Asian porn since high school, notably happy ending massage fantasy. When we started together, it was because I had the right optics. Jorge said Walt does love me as his wife. He just has this addiction. I told him to stop with that shit and let me know about Cambodia. Prior to his trip, Walt had been engaging in an online affair with a Cambodian woman for 2 years. That means it started after we were together. Our bachelor trip was his chance to meet up with her in person. What I didn't know is he had gotten his passport and visas for both Thailand and Cambodia. Jorge didn't want to go to Cambodia, and Walt had only ever mentioned a desire to visit Thailand, so that became their cover. They arrived the first morning and took a week's worth of selfies together around the resort. At that point, Walt left and went to meet this woman in Cambodia. He was there for 3 days with her. When he decided he was in love, she was from a well-enough off family. He wanted more, so he and Jorge concocted his disappearance. At first, he was only going to stay for the first 30 days, then show back up, but when it was done, he got his visa extended another 30 days. He couldn't extend it past that, so he just didn't. He hid there with her. However, being the shitty person he is, he began cheating on her as well. She caught him and kept him around because he was telling her he would help her immigrate to the States as his wife. After 4.5 years, she caught him again and not only dumped him, but reported him, and he got deported. He had to come clean to his parents, who I had grown close to. They feared losing contact with their grandson and chose to hide all of this from me, which was a betrayal so hard to hear. After being in each other's lives for so long, they also told Walt to leave me alone, but at the same time wanted him to have a relationship with our son. WTF. I don't know how they thought those two things wouldn't conflict. He ignored that and made the effort to rekindle our relationship when he had won. His dad made him marry me right away and told him to stop all of his terrible behaviors. He was hoping this would straighten Walt out now that he had his fun. Instead, all that happened was I threw away the best guy in the world for a workaholic porn addict with a creepy fetish. I feel so stupid. I headed home. I knew Jorge would inform Walt. I went ahead and sent Jorge's whole family the evidence of his infidelity. I then sent Walt's out to everyone I knew as well. By time Walt came home, which was way earlier than he ever had, he was fuming and getting bombarded with messages. I already had my car loaded with mine and kids' things. My best friend had taken the kids earlier. Walt came at me with attitude, and I was ready to fight. He switched approaches, and I tried to gaslight me and explain I was having it. I told him I knew about everything. Cambodia, the porn, the sex worker. He told me, she is not a sex worker, just a college student in need of extra money. I screamed back at him, that is fucking worse. Now you're just taking advantage of a young girl in need. He suddenly shut up after that, and I told him he could expect divorce papers and nothing else. Then I left. It's been a few weeks. I feel like an idiot for not figuring this out. I'm starting to notice the signs I overlooked and that I was keeping myself blind to them. The long hours at work, even though we don't need it. The starting of his own bank account from our joint account. The fact he signs up or agrees to every business trip or conference. It was just his way of feeding his depravity. The worst part is he came back for me. He could have came back and left me alone. I could have married Kevin, and now knowing what I gave him up for, I hate myself even more now, where I am getting some push that I'm overreacting. I am pushing for 100 custody and no visitation for him. In the interim, I have evidence of porn addiction, work addiction, and visiting sex workers. I am also going 100 no contact with his parents. A few people, not many, are saying I should not try to cut the father and grandparents out of my kids' lives. I, however, disagree and feel Walt is a danger to them given his self-destructive and manipulative behavior. His parents will only get the time he gets, and at this point I'm at best offering weekly supervised visits. Otherwise, they are not to be in my life to any degree. What do you all think? Is this too much? Should I let them be in my kids' lives? He is a good father when he is there, and they are great grandparents, but I can't get over the fact it's all built on lies and manipulation. So last year, something unexpected happened. I was in a bitter custody dispute with my lying, cheating ex-husband. Ever since I found out about his cheating 3 years earlier, he had been making my life hell. The divorce took forever. He snowballed the price of our house, and then he fought every custody decision along the way. The unexpected thing was my ex-fiancé. Kevin figured out that my ex-husband was bragging about this on Reddit out of nowhere. He emailed me the evidence, and it helped tremendously in court. I was really excited when I first heard from Kevin and tried to engage with him on a personal level. He didn't want that. And I understood I hurt him more than he ever deserved. I wish I could go back and do it all over again, because believe me, hindsight is 20/20, and this was probably the biggest mistake of my life. Although I attempted to reach him, he blocked me. When he did that, I took the hint and let it go. However, I can't stop thinking about him. I just feel like he wouldn't have helped me like that if he didn't still have some sort of feelings. For me, he very well could have just turned the other cheek. I'm really thinking about reaching out to him. I don't know what his relationship status is, but I think it's worth a shot. I honestly never thought I would hear from him again, so it almost feels like fate that he was the one to save me. I've been checking around the different platforms, and it seems he still doesn't do social media. I know his email, so I'm thinking about creating a new one so I can message him if he tells me he is married or seeing someone. I'll let this go, but at this point I feel like I need to try. I'm still kicking myself for letting him go all those years ago. He was really the most wonderful man and a great dad to my son. This has to be my chance at make things right, don't you think? Would you go for it? I think I'm going to go for it. And the finale of this fascinating story will be told by Kevin. Emily got into contact with me. She had a new email account. I did not read it, just blocked her again. Then she did the same thing again. This time I did read it. It was a semi-long email. It basically said, "Thank you for your help. I'm sorry for the choices I made. I bet you or I'd like to meet, catch up, and show a little appreciation for the help with my ex." Obviously, it wasn't worded this way, but that's the gist. I showed it to Carly, and she said there is no doubt in her mind that Emily wants to get back together with me, telling me that the tone is flirty. She then asked me what I thought about that. I said I would rather cut my own feet off. I'm just going to block her again. Carly said to me, "I don't think she will get the hint anytime soon." She is not outright saying it, so I think you should meet and make it perfectly clear you're not interested. Give you a little more practice of being petty. She said the last part with a laugh. I agreed to give it a shot. I responded to the email and said I'd be willing to do a friendly one-time meetup. She asked if the next day would be fine, and I replied yes. She then sent back to meet her at noon at the Starbucks on Spring Mill Road, the very Starbucks we met at all those years ago. I told her under no circumstances was she to bring Paul, and she swore she would not. She ended up sticking to that, because had she not, I would have walked out. I arrived before she did, grabbed a drink and a table. When she came in, she walked over to me and went for the hug. I rejected it and gave her the handshake. She seemed a little sad, and I began questioning this choice. She excused herself to get a drink and then came back. I sat there staring at her, waiting for her to say something first. She finally began, "You look really good." I replied, "Thanks. I go hit the bags with the MMA guys sometimes." "Emily, I thought you were in a boxing." Slightly annoyed by the small talk. "I am, but the MMA gym is close to the house, and they obviously work boxing too. But I doubt this is why you wanted to meet." She began telling me about what she found out about Walt. I stopped her and told her I already knew. I also told her about him attacking me a year ago. Then came what Carly told me to expect. "I'm sorry for what happened between us. I made a huge mistake. I let this Hollywood ideal of lost love get in my head. It was a very traumatic time for me as well. I just can't begin to tell you how sorry I am. I was hoping you could find a way to forgive me or give me a chance to earn that forgiveness." I deadpan said I got over all of that a long time ago. My distaste for Walt was much stronger. "I'm glad your situation worked out, but I did that for your kids." She became a bit more overt. "I just have this feeling like there could still be something there. I have regretted losing you for quite a while now, and I just feel like fate brought you back. I mean, what are the odds you of all people would find those Reddit posts? I just have this feeling that the universe is trying to bring us back together." I was about to reply, but Carly's timing was perfect. She had been listening via speakerphone. As she came in, she smiled at me and said, "Hey, Kev, you ready to go?" She then gave me a kiss that lingered a little longer than normal for public. She looked at Emily and extended her hand. "You must be his ex-fiancé." Emily looked a little annoyed. "Yeah, Kevin didn't mention he was dating anyone. I guess he likes them young now." She said that like it was a dig at the both of us. Carly laughed and said with a smile, "Oh, honey, you're sweet. I'm a 39-year-old mother of two, but I'll take the compliment nonetheless. I don't get called young too often. Also, I'm his wife for the last 7 years. She then posed her stance in a way that really accentuated her amazing figure. Emily looked a little shocked. "Kevin, why didn't you tell me you were married?" I stood up, prepared to leave with my wife. "You never asked. Plus, I wanted you to know no one was waiting around for you." At that point, we headed out. I guess I'm realizing now that I never mentioned that in my post either. I met Carly about a year after my engagement ended. We've been married almost 7 years, but I won't fault my wife for rounding up. We have a 5-year-old daughter and her 14-year-old son from her first marriage. His dad is not a D-bag, and we get along well. My stepson calls me Kevin, probably always will, but we still have a really good relationship. I wouldn't trade for anything. When we got back into the car, Carly looked at me and said, "See, it's fun to be petty sometimes." I just nodded and thought to myself, yeah, it really was. I haven't gotten another email from Emily so I'm thinking she got the hint.